why people struggle, I believe that if you don't understand the history of wealth, you cannot solve the mystery of wealth. And I know I've taught this before, but I'm going to teach it again, because if you'll just hang in there with me, I promise you, when I bring this all together at the end, you will understand what is the most valuable skill for you to work on, the two most valuable skills for you to work on in the age of AI that'll keep you from getting left behind. Okay, so the history and mystery of wealth. I'm going to talk about that first. So the history and mystery of wealth works like this. From the beginning of time to the mid-1700s, the economic infrastructure of the world was based on agriculture or land. So it was the agricultural age. And in the agricultural age, the people who owned the land owned the wealth, because land equaled wealth. And the people who owned the land owned the wealth. And if you didn't own land, if you were born into a family that didn't own land, you were born poor. And if you were born into a family that owned land, you were born wealthy. And people would use their land for raising crops. People would use their land for raising cattle, right? So, but the people who owned the land didn't work the land. The people who owned the land would hire peasants. That's what they were called. They would hire peasants, people who didn't own land, to come farm the land for them. The peasants would work the fields. They would bring the wealth to the landlord, the lord over the land, and then they would be able to keep enough to stay strong enough to work the land again another year, right? And so it was a society where wealth was perpetuated amongst the wealthy and poverty was perpetuated among the poor. There was no middle class. For literally thousands of years, the whole idea of a middle class didn't even exist. And so in the agricultural age, things changed very slowly. You were probably born in a town, grew up in a town, lived in a town, died in a town, and maybe never even visited another town the whole time you were alive, right? You certainly didn't go visit other countries. That wasn't a thing. I'm getting ready to go on vacation, I'm going to go to these different countries. That was not a thing, going to different countries. People didn't do that. We take so much for granted today, right? So in the agricultural age, land equaled wealth, change happened very slowly. And whatever your station was in life when you were born would probably be your station in life when you died, unless you were born wealthy and then some powerful nation came, conquered your nation, and took all your land. And now you went from being rich to being poor because you had the wealth, but you didn't have the warfare. And so in the agricultural age, land equal wealth, change happened very slowly, and you wouldn't really expect to see a whole lot of changes in your lifetime. So people got used to doing the same thing. So they knew what worked yesterday would work today, and they knew what worked today would work tomorrow. And then in the mid-1700s, from the mid-1700s, you know what, let me do that in a different color so you guys don't get bored with colors, for those of you who can see them. Okay, in the mid-1700s to around the 1950s, we moved from the agricultural age into the industrial age, because during the industrial age, people started inventing things to make farming the land easier. They started making machines, which in the industrial age, machines equaled wealth, and the people who owned the machines owned the wealth. Now, here's the interesting thing. The industrial age made wealth creation by people who were born poor, for the first time in world history, a possibility. Somebody could be born poor and invent a machine, or work with a machine, or collaborate with somebody who invented a machine, and they could change their station in life from poor to rich. And in the industrial age, people became mega wealthy. People who were born poor, people like Rockefeller, people like Henry Ford, people like J.P. Morgan, people like Dale Carnegie. Born poor, died rich. Lived rich, died rich. Perpetuated wealth for their family, some of them for generations. So machines equal wealth. Well, the interesting thing about the industrial age was the people who invented the industrial age, the people who developed or grew up in the industrial age, they were always attempting to figure out how they could make more money, and they figured out if they would standardize production and manufacturing, they could make more money. But did you know, I think it was Smith & Wesson, did you know that this gun manufacturer, I'm pretty sure it was Smith & Wesson, are the ones who created the concept of standardized production? because what they had was they had like 15 dudes making guns, but all the dudes had their own way of making guns. And so the parts from one gun didn't fit another gun because all these different people had their different ways of making guns. And they said, you know what? This doesn't make sense. Why don't we just have one person create barrels and another person create stocks and another person create triggers? And so what happened was all of the parts became interchangeable. And then that eventually became the standard for manufacturing. And so in the industrial age, people created machines to manufacture machines. People created machines to farm the land. People created machines to distribute all the stuff that people were manufacturing and all the crops people were growing, like the railroad was big, the automobile industry, the airplane industry, all of these things were created in the industrial age. But the other thing that the industrial age moguls created, they didn't just want to standardize manufacturing. They wanted to standardize manufacturing employees who could work in their factories. So they gave big grants to education, to train people to become employees in their factories. The educational system, the way it exists today, is an industrial age idea, even though the industrial age basically came to an end in the mid-1950s. So think about that. The industrial age came to an end 75 years ago, but the education was created by people in that era for the way they wanted life to work in that era, and it no longer serves us, and it no longer serves our children. It didn't really serve our children then. It served the people who created it. And one of the things about the industrial age that's so prevalent, pervasive, and still people believe, and it literally holds so much power over people, is that in the industrial age was a very permission-based society. And what does that mean? That means if you wanted to do something, someone who owned a machine had to believe that you had the ability to do it. And if they didn't believe you had the ability to do it, they wouldn't let you do it. They wouldn't let you use your machines to do it. For instance, let's say you believed you were like articulate enough to write a book. It didn't matter unless a publishing company that owned printing presses believed you were good enough to write a book. And so you had to get permission from a publishing company to be an author. If you could sing, or you thought you could sing, you had to go through a record label who had recording equipment, who could record your voice and then distribute it to the masses. And if they didn't believe you could sing, it didn't matter if you thought you could sing. It didn't even matter if millions of people thought you could sing, because you had no way of multiplying and duplicating your voice and putting it out there for the masses, right? And so everything that you wanted to do, someone else controlled it. And so, what's one of the funniest things I ever see? Shows like America's Got Talent, American Idol, all these shows where people are competing for 4 judges to give them permission to do a thing. That's so fascinating to me. When people like Adele, people like Taylor Swift, people like Russell Simmons have already proven you can create your own audience. And you don't need permission from an industrial age record label to dub you as a singer. You don't need permission from Hollywood to make you an actor. I mean, look at Tyler Perry. He built a billion-dollar empire that started with him selling VHS tapes out of the trunk of his car when he was homeless, because he was operating from a totally different paradigm than the industrial age paradigm. So what happened next? Well, the 1950s to 1978, we went from the industrial age, we went to the distribution age. And in the distribution age, outlets equaled wealth. And here's the interesting thing about that. Equaled wealth. And when I say outlets equaled wealth, this is when department stores, malls, infomercials, multi-level marketing, direct sales, all of these industries, for lack of a better word, popped up, and we had new millionaires. In fact, think about this. John D. Rockefeller was the richest man in the world back in the early 1900s. Carnegie was another one who eventually became the richest man in the world. But during the distribution age, Sam Walton was the richest man in the world. Distribution, we sell cheap stuff cheap. I mean, good stuff cheap, sorry. All right, so distribution, right, through Walmart. Like, I was a grown man before I ever heard of Walmart. I was a full-grown man because it was like really prominent in the South. Like, when I met my wife, this was in 1982. I met my wife, and she wasn't my wife. I met this girl, and went to Texas to stay with her. I stayed in her youth pastor's house and met her family. And she said, I got to go to Walmart. Well, what's Walmart? I never heard of it. Like, I knew about Kmart, but I never heard of Walmart. Sam Walton was the richest man in the world by far. He was like so rich that when he died, his wife and children became the second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth wealthiest people in the world when they split up his wealth among them, when Bill Gates became number one. Why? Because Sam Walton created wealth in the era in which he lived. There's not a lot of wealth advice that I can give you that's going to be better than, if you're serious, not just curious about creating wealth, you must create wealth in the era in which you live. Like, there are very few things that I can tell you that are as important as, if you're serious, not just curious about creating wealth, you have to create wealth in the era in which you live and stop attempting to earn a living in the past. Okay. So in the distribution age, outlets equaled wealth, and people the outlets own the wealth. What happened in 1978? 1978 to 1994. We went into the technology age. It's interesting, too, how Sam Walton is the person who ushered in the technology age. A lot of people don't realize that. But Sam Walton, what he did was he would go to IBM and recruit computer programmers, and he would recruit them to Walmart so that they could create software that would track his inventory so he could know what he was getting low on before he got low on it. Right? And so in the technology age, what I call tech-know how equaled wealth. So tech-know-how equaled wealth, and the people who knew how to use technology knew how to use technology to create new ways of leveraging information. Those are the people who own the wealth.